Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Room. This time we're going to be in a very interesting seance room, so that's cool. Speaking of seances, it's not really seance involved, but today I'm going to be talking about Tormented Souls, the video game. So, this is a game that I have not personally played myself, so gameplay wise, I can't really talk about it, but story wise, I can because I saw a few people play this when it first came out. And I really, really like the game, and I really, really like most things about it, but I have issues with it. It's definitely not a perfect game. I'm sure it will probably be a fun game for people who like tank controls. I'm not one of them. And it's kind of like a little mini love letter to like horror games of the past, like Silent Hill and OG Resident Evil with the tank controls and all that stuff, the puzzles. I can say that the atmosphere is really great. The music is really awesome. There's honestly this really like tense atmosphere for a good portion of it. They really play with the whole like survival horror mechanic with you running out of bullets or nails fairly quickly and that kind of stuff. But even though it does a lot of stuff very well, the story I think is partially what suffers the most from like for everything. It kind of sucks. So I have some questions and some qualms, and I like after I watched playthroughs of it a few times, and I like because I do this thing where when I get into stuff I kind of obsess over it. And keep in mind this was when it first came out, so this is maybe like a year ago now. I don't remember how long it's been out for now, but I haven't watched it since then. So it's been a while. I might be mistaken on a few things plot wise, but these are the notes that I wrote a while ago. Firstly though, let's just start at the start. So, when Caroline receives photos of the twins, also there will be spoilers. Caroline is our main character. It starts off with her receiving photos of twins and this really ominous little note, right? So when she receives the photos of the twins, like she's almost immediately curious about it and then decides to go to the mansion at night. But why? Like, what is driving her to go there? Because if I received a cryptic letter with photos of twins and an address, like I would probably do a lot of research first before I decided to go there. It did say that it took her 2 weeks to get to the hospital mansion place, and so maybe in that time she did do a little bit of digging, but like maybe didn't find anything, and that's why she's like, I gotta go, I gotta know. But like we don't see that in the game, so we don't know for sure if the 2 weeks was the travel time to get there or if the 2 weeks was partially like her looking stuff up. And also like why is she so determined to get the answers? Because I don't remember this place being something that like we get to see is in her past. We obviously it is. We find out that obviously it is in her past, but like she doesn't know that. As far as she knows, it has nothing to do with her. So why is she so curious about it? That's kind of my issue. This also kind of sort of ties into it because it kind of takes place at the beginning. But how does Caroline know how to make a shotgun from pipes? Because like we don't get to see a lot of her life or her personality before she goes to the mansion. Like we have a mini opening sequence kind of where she's in her room, but we don't get to look around her room. We just see her in there before she travels. And like she gets the letters and the photo, right? And then she leaves, and like that's it. We don't get to see like anything really. And so I feel like it could have benefited, the game probably could have benefited story wise if we could have explored her room, and maybe looked at some other photos or read some journal entries or seen the books on her bookshelf or something like that before she decides to go to the hospital. One, it would have been a fairly good tutorial sort of a thing to like show you how to do some of the controls, maybe not combat yet, but like the regular controls. It could literally just be like, yeah, this is how you walk and this is how you look at things and like whatever. Like I feel like that would have been a good way to do that. And it would give us some details about who she was before the whole hospital incident. And then I put in my notes, it could also help us as players to not immediately suspect that she's the other twin if she's an unreliable narrator and it seems like she doesn't even know if she was adopted or anything, if she was adopted. So she doesn't know a lot about her parents. We don't know a lot about her life. We find out about her life a little bit. Like, the whole plot is very confusing and convoluted. It's in a bunch of different notes, but it's like, it's a little confusing, I think. But from what I remember, her grandpa was doing, like, experiments of some kind. They used twins a lot, because it's always twins. And so there was her and her sister, but, like, her mother, I think, tried to get her to escape and was maybe successful in getting one of the girls to escape, and that's Caroline. But the other twin was trapped in the mansion, and then the grandfather was like, well, if we don't have both twins, then you're fucking useless, and then, like, doesn't give a shit about the other twin, and she ends up dying in one of the timelines, because there's time travel in here, too. But, like, we find out all this stuff later, and Caroline finds out all this stuff later, because she doesn't remember any of this. So, like, that's what I mean, like, she doesn't remember this stuff. She doesn't remember anything. And so if neither of her parents went with her, and she just, like, was picked up randomly, she was likely orphaned, and doesn't necessarily mean that she got adopted, but if she was adopted, then that's cool, and at her age, she might have been adopted. But she could have just, like, spent her days, kind of like Anastasia, just being an orphan and then one day leaving. We don't really know. It doesn't say anything. But if we learned that even she doesn't know where she was from or if she was adopted, like, I don't know. Just having more background information, I think, would have been cool. As for the shotgun, the pipe shotgun, like, if we saw that maybe she was into engineering or if she was going to college for engineering or went to college, because I don't think we know exactly how old she is. I can't remember. Like, that would explain maybe how she knows how to make a shotgun from pipes, or if there was a note that taught her in the actual mansion to make a shotgun from pipes. Why would that information be there? I have no idea. But it would have made a difference, I think, for why she suddenly has this knowledge. And, like, it would make sense for why she creates that weapon when she's there. The other thing is that, like, she does cut out her own eyeball, and she doesn't know that it's her that cuts it out. 'Cause she goes, like, to the past, right? And then she sees her naked body, and she cuts out her own eyeball from her naked body that is in the past. But, like, my main question for that is, I was like, how does she know how to cut out her own eyeball without damaging the socket or the lids? Like, it would have made sense if either we saw that she was maybe also into medical stuff, maybe she was going to college to be a nurse or do medical stuff, be a surgeon, maybe her adoptive parents were surgeons or something like that. Like, just a little more background information that would have lent more, like, a more realistic sort of thing for why she knows certain things that she knows. And also, like, what drives her to go there in the first place, because that was my biggest confusion, is I was like, okay, why would you go there in the first place? Like, I don't understand why this note in particular with this picture causes you to go there. If she maybe had that same photo, like, for some reason, and she just can't remember it, and then someone sent her a dual copy of that photo with an address, then that would make sense, because then she'd be like, okay, like, and if it does show her have that photo, I don't remember it really, like, focusing on it. It might have been, like, in the background somewhere, but that's not obvious enough for me. And it can be easily missed, which means that, like, her reasons for being there, her drive, her motive don't make sense. And so that was my biggest issue with it, is I was like, it doesn't make sense why she's there, and it really doesn't make sense why she decides to go at night. Like, why does she go at night? And I think I'll talk about that in a bit. Is it? Well, let's see. Sorry, I have, like, my notes down, but, like, I just don't understand why she goes there at night. It just doesn't make any sense, because she could have gone during the day, gotten knocked out, and then it's suddenly nighttime when she wakes up. But she goes during the night, gets knocked out, and then wakes up at night, and it's still night. And then it's morning when she leaves. But, like, I don't know. And then why does she stay after she gets her eye plucked out? Like, she's unconscious when it happens. She just wakes up in a bathtub hooked up to a medical machine of some kind with her eyeball missing. And, like, that's a huge mystery until you discover later on that you did it to yourself. But, like, if you lost your eyeball and you got knocked out in this place, wouldn't you try and, like, do your best to find a way to leave? Like, smash the windows open and then leave or something like that? Like, I would be like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Someone clearly doesn't want me here. I'm gonna come back maybe with police officers or something like that. I don't know. Or other preparations. Now that you know it's dangerous, come back with other preparations. But she just stays. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. How does she not suspect the priest to be up to something when he's the only other human being in the building that we are aware of until we find William's body? So William is the dad, I think, and I can't remember if William was legit taking part in the experiments that the grandpa was doing, or if he, like, wasn't really that cool with it, because the grandpa is the mom's dad, from what I can remember. And William, I think, is involved to an extent, but I think he was kind of also against it, especially with his daughters. I don't quite remember. Like I said, it was kind of convoluted, a little confusing. So I don't really remember, and it wasn't made super clear. I really only remember that, like, the mom was really against it. She really didn't want it. But I think I remember William also kind of being against it, but still going through with the experiments and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I put in my notes, it seems pretty obvious that he, the priest, is up to no good and probably playing dumb. But how does she not suspect him for a second? Is she truly that naive? And if so, is she naive about him because she herself is religious and doesn't believe a holy man, quote unquote, could do something evil? I honestly couldn't understand why she was just like, oh, Father, you're the only other human being that I've met in this entire place, and I also was attacked and my eyeball is missing. That couldn't have been you, could it? Only other human being in this entire freaking place? Like, she didn't suspect him for a second. She was just like, oh, thank God. Whew, there's a priest here. I feel more comfortable now. And I'm just like, but why? Like, that's sketchy as hell. Immediately I was like, well, I'd suspect that priest, like, right off the bat. If we actually ran into William, which it makes sense why we don't, but if we did actually run into William, like, we accidentally met him and maybe he didn't know who we were and we didn't know who he was, like, that would have made a little more sense to me, or, like, ran into, like, one or two more people. I don't even know. I don't know how they would swing that, but, like, if we were to run into more people, then it would, like, make the priest a lot less suspicious. But because he's literally the only other human being that we run into, it makes him so obviously suspicious. Like, who else could it be who did that to us? You know what I mean? So I felt like they made that really super obvious. They made the fact that he's the bad guy really obvious. They made the fact that we are the other twin really, really obvious. And I feel like there's a lot of things that they could have done to, like, throw us off the scent and not make it as predictable as it was. So that was one of my main issues, is that it was just, like, highly predictable. There were a couple times where I was like, maybe I am wrong, but most of the evidence is pointing towards me being correct in thinking this way. I don't know how all the pieces fit together yet, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. And then at the end, you're like, okay, all the pieces still don't really entirely fit together, but it makes sense. Also, I think it's weird that this typewriter is typing by itself. Interesting typewriter, very old. Let's see. Oh, the creatures. Where are all the creatures coming from? So, I get in a way that they're coming from the mirror world, because in the real world, like, all of the monsters are torsos, and then in the mirror world, they're all legs, but they're not. I don't remember there being monsters in the mirror world. There might be, I can't remember. Maybe towards the end there are, but, like, in the mirror world, I remember seeing a lot of legs, but then in the real world, when you actually encounter the creatures, they're all torsos, and so I think that's interesting, that they were cut in half that way. So half of someone's body is in the real world, the other half is in the mirror world. But my question was like that's cool, but how did they pass into our world, and what brought them here? Who created them? Were they created because of William's experiments to find a cure for his wife? And how are both the priest and William traversing the mansion without getting mauled to death by them? They don't mention these creatures at all, so it's almost as if they don't exist for the priest and William traversing the mansion, or for anyone but Caroline. But then how does the priest eventually lose an arm? So you never encounter William. You find his body, you find a note, you find it dated, and you discover that he has been in the mansion the whole time that you have been in the mansion. You just never ran into him. And by the time you find his body, he's dead. So you never do actually meet him, but he's certainly there in the mansion at the same time that you are. And he's doing stuff while you're also doing stuff, and the priest is doing stuff. So there's 3 of you guys in the mansion all at one time, but you never encounter William, which I think is kind of a shame. I think it would have been interesting to encounter him even briefly, but whatever. And then the priest is like, when Caroline mentions the creatures, the priest is like, whatever are you talking about? And it kind of makes sense as a manipulation tactic that maybe she is the only one, or he's making her think that she's the only one that sees them, or something like that. Playing dumb, but like, that also made me a little more like super sus about him, because if he would have just played along and been like, oh yeah, no, I've encountered them too, I've been using this, and like I have no idea what's about, like what they're about, I have no idea, they just suddenly appeared, and started wreaking havoc. If he had played along, then I feel like that would have made him, like that would have been something good that would have made me be like, huh, okay, so the priest is also fighting these creatures, which like he could be manipulating us, but he could also be telling the truth and being genuine, and he doesn't know anything about them, and which would mean that he's not involved. So like that would have been a really good like tiny little red herring kind of a thing to put in there. I don't know if red herring's the right word, but whatever. But he like played it off like, oh no, I have no idea what creatures you're talking about, and then suddenly he's missing an arm in another scene, and you have to like go to the mirror world and give him a new arm, and he's just like, oh yeah, you gave me a new arm, wow, thank you. And I'm like, what? This is fucking insane. This doesn't make any sense. Like, why is he so casual about everything? If I were him and I didn't know anything that was happening, or I was trying to play it off like I didn't know anything that was happening, then like I would at least pretend like I was freaking out about things. I would be like, oh my god, the monster took my arm, but he was just like, my arm, and then he's like, oh thank you, you saved me, and she's like, what? So I don't know, man, like, she seems a little dumb with some stuff too, Caroline. Like, she seems not very perceptive, which is also why I question how the hell she knew how to make a pipe shotgun if she's so imperceptive, and like she's just not, she's not seeing the obvious clues and hints that like everyone else is seeing, and I'm like, she can't, there's no way she can be that dumb, right? There's no way. She's really smart about some things, and in a lot of other things she's super blind and really dumb about it. So yeah, there's that. This part was spooky. That's a spooky seance. So yeah, I kind of had issues with that. In terms of time travel, how exactly is that working? I don't personally know a ton about time travel. I know that there are like different kinds, and they all work differently, and sometimes they can collide. Also, I think In Space with Markiplier is doing a great job concerning time travel with like the wormhole and all that fun stuff. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out, because it's actually really great, and part 2 is coming out soon. By the time this is out, though, part 2 will be out. But yeah, so there are basically 2 versions of the story playing out at the same time that don't entirely make sense. So there is a big, like, saggy mutated monster lady who we discover is our twin, and she's been mutated. So, like, there's her, and we see, like, flashes of her in the mirror in, like, at some point before we've even encountered her in either her monster form or her child form in the past. Like, we have not encountered her yet, but we see her in the mirror. But then when we go to the little prison room, there's a skeleton there, and that's her skeleton. So she's both existing and not existing at the exact same time, which doesn't make any sense to me. It would have made more sense if they showed the flash of her in the mirror after we had gone into the past and saved her in the past, because that's how she becomes the mutated monster, is we save her in the past. If we don't save her in the past, she just dies of starvation, and then she rots in that cell. But if we do save her, she kind of escapes. She doesn't escape the mansion, but she escapes the cell, and then she lives out her days, like, in the mansion somewhere, which I'll get to that later. But she does that, and then because of all of the stuff that's down there, she mutates. And so it would make more sense if they showed that flash of the monster in the mirror after we had saved the twin, even though it wouldn't have to have been, like, immediately after, but she's already existing in her mutated form while there's also her corpse in the exact same mansion. So for me, I'm like, that doesn't make sense that there are two versions of her existing in the exact same space if this is a time thing. Like, it would make more sense time-wise if we save her and then the creature shows up. But they're both existing at the same time before we've encountered either of them. And so it doesn't make any sense to me. So there's that. I have an issue with that. Let's see, what else was there? Yeah, I mean, that was basically, like, the main thing. And then also with, I think I had an issue with the priest, because the priest was like, oh yeah, I met you a few days ago. And she's like, what? But, like, Caroline is constantly going to the past and changing things. And so for me, I'm like, is she time hopping? And some of these timelines are starting to, like, collide with each other, and that's why two versions of the sister can exist at once? Or is she actually, like, hopping between timelines when she's doing certain things? Or is it the type of time travel where she can go to the past, but then it changes everything in the future? Like, she goes back to the past, changes something, and that completely changes the future that she comes back to. Like, is it one timeline and she's changing everything in that one timeline, so everything that existed in that future area completely disappears and starts anew with what she's changed? Or is she going between timelines? I don't know, man. It was just, I don't know a lot about time travel, like I said, but I know enough to know that certain things seemed wrong in the actual game when things were happening. The time travel aspect of it just wasn't working. And there's also, like, kind of dimension travel, because you have the mirror realm and then you have the real world. And so there's, like, a lot of different types of dimension and time hopping that's happening, and it doesn't all make sense to me. And so I kind of wish that it would have made sense. I kind of wish that they would have, like, tuned that in a little better to make it make sense with the plot. It just seemed to me like they put together a plot and then they were like, fuck the details, whatever, it's gonna be so cool. That was just kind of how it felt to me, and I was like, there's such big issues, though. There's such glaringly huge issues, and they create plot holes in your plot, so that it makes your story not actually that good. And very predictable with some things. A little predictable with other things, but a little less predictable, I should say, with some things. But, like, in general, the story was very predictable, except for certain things, and those certain things were only not predictable because of the time traveling aspect. But, like, then you include the time traveling aspect and it still doesn't make sense. And that's why we couldn't have predicted certain things, because it doesn't make sense for us to have believed those things to be true when it just doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. I'm rambling now, but I had an issue with the whole time travel, dimension hopping kind of thing. Why is William letting the priest stay in the mansion? Does he even know he's there? How could he not? So I did have those questions too, because William and the priest, who is the grandpa, like, had issues, right? And the grandpa was like, you don't even know, like, how long they've both been in that house. And I feel like if the grandpa was doing shit that William was not cool with, and then William's wife ended up like dying and stuff, which it's also a little unclear exactly when she died, because they made it sound like it was fairly recently, but also when the girls were children. And so I didn't understand time-wise when exactly the wife died. But because it seemed like he was, like, William was still up until his dying breath working on a way to cure his wife. But if his wife was dead, why would you be trying to cure her? You know what I mean? But it also seemed like she died when the girls were children. Because if she didn't die when the girls were children, I don't know, man. William didn't seem very attentive. Like, it seemed like he loved his daughters, but he also was so preoccupied with his wife that he didn't really give a fuck that one of his daughters was captured and missing and the other one was gone. Like, and he clearly, I think, didn't like the grandpa, but also, was the grandpa living there the whole time, even after all of this drama played out? And if so, like, why? Why was William letting him stay there? And, like, if he didn't know that he was there, how did he not know that he was there? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I was a little confused about that, about William and the priest grandpa guy both existing in the same space at the same time also, not because of time reasons, but just because of, like, familial history reasons. It just didn't make any sense to me that they would both be there and both be cool with each other being there. And, like, the mansion's pretty big, but, like, it's also not. And then if you have all those creatures, like, walking around and stuff, I don't know, man. There's just a lot of stuff in the mansion itself didn't make sense plot-wise. It didn't make sense that they were both there at the same time, that they were not aware of each other, that they weren't, like, the grandpa wasn't trying to manipulate William into getting you to do things. William didn't know that you were there somehow, and did not give a fuck that the grandpa was there or didn't know that he was there. It just didn't make any sense. I don't know. Again, I'm kind of rambling, but it as like whirlwindy and crazy as it kind of sounds, as with me saying it, that's how it feels to try and find reason in some of the plot lines that are happening or some of the plot points that are happening. And I don't know, I feel like that could have been fleshed out a little more, how, like, the characters are currently involved with each other in the time that the game is actually taking place. And maybe even a little bit the space between. A lot of stuff in the story just did not make any sense at all. Like, the story, I think, for me, was the biggest killer, because I love the way that it looked. I loved Caroline's style. I freaking love that style. Someone commented on one of the videos that I was watching that they hated her style. They were like, her style doesn't make sense. It's mixing too many aesthetics. And I'm like, that's exactly why I love it, though. You have the really freaking adorable, like, super feminine, really cute, little white dress with the pink ribbons and stuff, you know? But then you have, like, the badass leather and the badass boots and, like, the fishnet tights and, like, all... I don't remember if she's wearing fishnet tights, but whatever. It was, like, that kind of thing where I'm like, you're mixing, like, the really cute, sweet, feminine adorableness with, like, hardcore badass looking kind of shit. And I'm like, that's exactly the kind of aesthetic that I want to have, because that's how I feel. I want to be both cute and terrifying, so I feel like the style actually works, because I think she looks badass, personally, so... And she's got the gloves. Oh, I fucking love the gloves. So I love her character style. Absolutely love it. But there's so many other... And, like, the atmosphere is really great, like I said. The graphics are pretty good. Like, the way that they played with light in the game and sound, really super fantastic. Story-wise, could have used some more work. Really, really, really could have used some more work. Speaking of which, how did the sister survive underground for 7 years on her own? Wasn't she missing food and water? How did she survive? The grandpa clearly didn't believe that she was worth keeping alive at one point, which is why she died in the one timeline where she's in the cell. And there's a note discovered that he didn't even know that she was alive in the other timeline until much later. So he wasn't likely the one helping her. And William doesn't know that she's there at all, so he couldn't have helped her. So who was helping her? This was another big plot line for me, like plot hole. Because I was like, okay, so the sister dies in the cell originally, which is whatever. William probably doesn't know that the sister is dead in that timeline. And the grandpa doesn't give a shit because he's like, well, my ritual thing doesn't work unless I have both twins. Which also doesn't make sense at the end, but I'll get to that in a second. So he needs both the twins, so when one of the twins goes missing, which is us, he's like, well, fuck the other twin, who cares? And he just lets her rot. In the other timeline, though, where she escapes, he doesn't really care that she escaped, but then she ends up living her life underground, under the mansion, because she can't find a way to escape. But that's exactly where all of, like, the stuff is that mutates her. So, like, that's kind of an issue. But, like, does the mutation mean, like, does it hit her instantly and it means that she doesn't need to eat, maybe she doesn't really need to sleep that much, she doesn't need water at all, like, or is she secretly eating rats and, like, drinking her own piss, or what is happening there? How is she staying nourished enough to survive long enough to be mutated? It just doesn't make any sense that she survived 7 years without coming out from underground and no one is helping her. It's not like there was some secret hidden food supply down in the basement area, the underground area. I say basement, but I guess kind of it's a basement, but it's not really. It's an underground area. It's a whole underground, like, lab area, but it's not really a lab, but it's kind of, whatever. It's like a little bunker. So, like, it doesn't make sense to me how she gets food and how she, because, like, from what I can recall in the notes, she's kind of just, like, wandering around, but she can't escape, and she's afraid of her grandpa, and there's dudes with guns and stuff like that, so she just, like, never escapes. Somehow she makes it up to the mansion as a mutated person, and we discover that she is in the mirror realm somehow, because her room and our room in the real world mirror each other. But she has the mirror version, and then we have ours, and she's been watching us, kind of living vicariously through us, while also being mutated. So, like, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. I don't understand how she survived that whole time, personally. This one's kind of just, like, a question that I had while I was watching it. So when you're, like, in the morgue area underground, there are certain legs that, like, disappear into the walls, and then doors, like, slam shut randomly. And so for me, I was like, why is it happening as if there's some kind of ghost activity down there, when so far there has been no mention of ghosts ever at all in this entire game? There's no supernatural shit like that happening, like no ghost stuff happening. It's all like sci-fi kind of stuff happening. So for me, I was like, why is this in the game? It doesn't make sense that this ghost-like thing is happening in the game when there have been no ghostly encounters. It just doesn't make sense. So again, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, this is cool for, like, horror aspect-wise, but no one here has telekinesis, and no one here is a ghost. There have been neither of those instances happening in the game. There's no reason why these things should be moving on their own. Absolutely no reason. It doesn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense at all. What happened to William's body? He was poisoned by someone and died, probably. But then his body is suddenly gone and we never see it again. Was he actually poisoned? Maybe he was poisoned but didn't die immediately and tried to go somewhere and somehow did end up leaving the mansion. So you find his body, you see the note, he discovers that he's poisoned, right? Grandpa's probably the one that poisoned him, so Grandpa did know that he was there, somehow poisoned him, and for me, I'm like, why did you trust Grandpa with your shit if you knew that he was here? If you didn't know that he was here, why didn't you know that he was here? Why aren't you paying attention? Like, I don't know. Again, I went into all of that before. It doesn't make any sense to me. So it also doesn't make sense to me that he got poisoned. But he got poisoned, and then, like, his body's on the desk, but then you leave, and the next time that you come back there, his body is gone. Just miraculously gone. And for me, I was like, why is it gone? Where did it go? Who took his body? Why would they take his body? If no one took his body, was he actually poisoned? And if he wasn't actually poisoned, was he then looking for the grandpa to see if he could kill him? Or was he, like, poisoned but then, like, made it out of the mansion somehow? Or did he, like, go out a window even though there's no evidence that any windows were opened? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me what happened to his body. Where did it go? It's like one of those weird things where it happened and then there's no explanation for it. And there's a ton of that happening in this game, which I think is also what I really hate about it, is there's a lot of instances of things happening or things being said or things being shown to have happened, but then there's actually absolutely no explanation for it. And so yeah, I really like Tormented Souls, but I also really, really dislike the story of Tormented Souls. Anyways, that's my video. Thank you for watching. Bye!